Well, the state of Texas has paid for at least 2 sex changes for prisoners. This came out at a hearing on Tuesday where Representative Troy Nehls tore into the Bureau of Prisons Director Colette Peters. He's a little bombastic, but watch this exchange anyway because we can definitely learn from it.
I say I'm a man. I'm a woman now, and I haven't had any surgeries up to this point. Maybe I'll get them while I'm in prison, because I'm assuming we're paying for those, right?
We have paid for 2 gender-affirming surgeries.
Hey, 2. So once you start, you're going to continue. You ain't changing that, right?
There are 5.
I mean, look at this guy. This is an interesting guy, folks. Look at this guy. His name is Peter Langan. He got long hair. Look at this guy. He looks like a bad guy. He's a bad guy. He's a Nazi, ex-Nazi terrorist. He's a bad hombre. And this guy wants to be referred to as Donna. Do your employees, do you require them to say, call this guy now named, he must be called Donna?
Congressman, no, and in fact, in order to produce a name change.
Well, he's suing you all because he's claiming that his 8th Amendment rights were violated for not being provided gender-conforming surgery. For the people at home, this man is an ex-Nazi bank robber. In June, his lawsuit was settled, and I'd like to know whether this means that inmates now have the 8th Amendment right to sex changes. Are we paying for guys like this who are just sick? We send them to prison, we're restricting their freedom, and now this guy says he wants to be Donna. I suppose I understand why he'd want to be Donna, because you want to release this guy into the pen of heifers. You're releasing the stud into the pen of heifers is what you're doing. Isn't that what a guy would want to do? If I'm going to prison for 10 years and you're restricting my freedom, I guess I would want to go to the prison where the ladies are. Wouldn't you suggest that? Wouldn't that be a good idea? And if you're allowing that to take place through this process by talking to these shrinks and these guys, I'm going to convince you I'm a woman and I'm going to enjoy 5 years in prison. Matter of fact, half of them would probably say, don't even release me on patrol. I'm having too much fun here. I'm having too much fun. It is disgusting, quite honestly, what we've done to our country. Biden, 3 daughters, I have some real issues. They're very troubling. You can do better than that. I yield.
Jeez.
Thank you, Mr.
All right. Well, like I said, that was a bit bombastic, but there's some serious issues here, such as why would sex changes happen on taxpayer dollars? Why would taxpayers have to pay for this for prisoners? Now, a lot of times, the way that cross-sex hormones are administered is a result of Obamacare. So the Affordable Care Act says that you cannot withhold hormonal birth control. Even without parental consent, you still have to give that, right? And so the argument that lawyers have used is that you can't give hormones to only one gender, that the issuance of hormonal birth control means that everyone should have access to cross-sex hormones as well. And that's at least the way it's used in California. Now, but why would this be something that we should offer to transgender inmates? Now, the argument that they use is that it is cruel to deny someone gender affirmation, meaning if they say they're a different gender and we're forcing them to live as that gender because they came in with that genitalia, then we're not affirming their identity, and that is cruel.
Also, but they're in prison. So we're forcing them to be in prison because they murdered someone or carried out a bank robbery?
Right, but I don't think that we should use, we don't deny prisoners dignity. We don't make them walk around naked and whip them, right? They're allowed dignity. The argument that they're using is that this is undignified for a gender dysphoric person.
So then, okay, well then where do you draw the line then? You could say it's undignified that they should be able to watch 8 hours of television a day. It's undignified that they have bars that are inhibiting their view of the mountains. Right? That's undignified.
You could also say that someone who is who is otherwise body dysphoric because they're obese, maybe someone who's obese and feels dysphoric about their body because of the obesity should say, well, then I should have bariatric surgery because it's cruel.
Right.
That same argument applies. Someone who maybe identifies as someone with bigger boobs but doesn't in fact have bigger boobs should say, I should get those boobs because I'm very dysphoric with this flat chest. Someone who is anorexic, right, could go ahead, Philip, were you going to say something?
No, I was going to tag on like what you're saying. It's like this is universal health care in the U.S. It's just go to prison and you've got it.
Right.
Whatever you need, you got it.
Like I can only survive on prime rib 3 times a day. If I don't get it, I identify as a meat eater. So
right. And so,
I'll die.
Well, actually, that's a good point. Like if you say, I need only like microgreens and it's undignified otherwise. Like, so how do we choose this? Now, this is the same case that was made by Chelsea Manning while in a U.S. prison. While serving time in a man's prison, Bradley Manning became convinced that he was trans, and his lawyers argued for cross-sex hormones. They argued that not giving these cross-sex hormones was cruel. He details this in his book. He eventually wins and gets them, but he never does get transferred to a woman's prison. Now, the thing that broke my heart about this story is that while doing the important work of a whistleblower, you may not know his story, he provided Julian Assange the footage and documentation of the atrocities that the United States was committing abroad in the Middle East, specifically in Iraq. He had a really extraordinary punishment for having done that. So it's interesting that the U.S. Army has all of these like trans-friendly videos. We love trans people, but had 5 to 7, almost 10 years of torturing Chelsea Manning. So, that's conveniently left out of that. Now, I think that Chelsea Manning was really brave and tough and resilient. They put him in solitary. They, withheld food. They withheld information from him. They took him places, didn't tell him where he was going. They denied due process in a lot of different ways. And he took it, forgive the expression, but he took it like a man. He was brave, and no one can deny that. But then when he won his case for cross-sex hormones, he broke down. He writes about being anxious, depressed, put on suicide watch. There's a bug in front of me. It really broke down the natural mental strength that it took for Chelsea Manning to survive up to that point. And he talks about how there's no research showing just how these hormones are going to work on you. So he just really broke down and they had to watch him. So this really tough person who'd been through a really hard imprisonment and torture and all of this stuff, then wins a case to weaken his mental resolve and resiliency, and does that to himself. And it's heartbreaking because up to that point in this book, you're kind of like, don't make this harder on yourself than it already is. It's really hard to root for that. So even if you think that, this is a nice thing to do for someone because you're respecting their gender identity, there's no research that shows that. And in fact, he was allowed on computers. So he was on online forums saying, like, once you get into these cross-sex hormones, it's going to feel awful for about a month or 2. You're going to want to kill yourself. You're going to want to, but just stick with it because it gets better. And then what, right? So it just proves that this is an experiment. So even if you think that this is a dignified way to treat prisoners, we just don't know, because there is no research that shows that gender transition resolves gender dysphoria. So if you say you're dysphoric and you transition, that gender dysphoria persists. There's no research that shows that taking the hormones or changing your body makes you better. It doesn't. And
if it did,
go ahead.
You wouldn't have the mass number of detransitioners you have today. I mean, there are more and more all the time. They try to hide them, but there are many.
Right. So you resolve nothing. So let's look at this prisoner that this congressman brought up, because most of them have a history of sexual assault, the ones that are getting sex changes. This Texas prisoner that Representative Nels referred to, is not a sexual predator. This is Donna Langan. While living as Peter Langan, he was convicted to life in prison plus 35 years in 2 separate trials for robbing 2 banks using firearms and a destructive device, assaulting federal officer, and further firearms charges. And then he sued to get the sex change and won. There, again, will be no follow-up on whether Donna Langan feels better now as a woman, most likely not, because there's such a high rate of error depending on the degree of surgery, especially if it comes to genital reassignment surgery. That's a lifetime of discomfort and usually problems. Whether the hormones have resolved dysphoria, there's, no one will follow up to see, do you feel better? Do you stick with it? In fact, I saw research recently that showed that I think it's between 50 and 70% of people who go on cross-sex hormones are not filling those prescriptions 4 years later. They're just not, because it hurts to mess with yourself like that. So put aside whether or not this is for prisoners or not, we do have this shared value of not torturing prisoners. We don't make them walk naked or work, we have this basic dignity value. So if it were basic dignity to change their sex, we could discuss it. But knowing how awful it is on the human body, we need to collectively agree that this is medical experimentation and not a dignified way to treat prisoners. And again, the question is, where do we draw the line? Because gender dysphoria is only one of very many types of body dysphoria. Some people have dysphoric for limbs, like they don't feel like their arm is a part of their body and they literally want to sever from it. And so do we help those people in the same way? Because a dysphoria is a dysphoria. Well, like Clayton there didn't like his left foot, so we had to take it off, right? Is this the right way to be thinking about compassionate ways to treat anybody, much less prisoners?
Yeah, let us know in the chat below. Great discussion. Thank you. I love, and someone in the chat just said, I love the... This chat room is going on fire today. So thank you guys for your comments. You decided
not to read that one?
Well, I saw, I was like, okay, that's a little far. I can't really say that out loud. Someone over on, because we were talking about the faces that you make at me. Someone just said, Dr. M. Bogo says, Natali often makes a face when Clayton makes sexist, rude comments.
Yeah, does.
Shouldn't all people make a face when I make a sexist, rude comment?
I mean, there were a lot today, so.
Did I make any sexist, rude comments today?
I mean,
did I?
We need to have a counter on the back screen.
That's true. Like how many times I make a rude comment. I just don't suffer fools easily, I saw someone earlier saying, hey, if Redacted was right, we'd be in World War III by now. I don't know if you've looked around, but we currently are. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Have you seen the world? Have you seen NATO literally sending hundreds of billions of dollars into Ukraine? What the hell are you talking about? U.S. bases are being attacked in the Middle East. What the hell do you call it? They don't want to give it a name on television, like the Weather Channel giving a named storm, like. So
I was just gonna say that it's because they haven't named it yet,
right? So once they give it a name,
war because they haven't called it that,
right? As soon as Fox News puts up a banner on the lower screen says we're calling this, I don't know,
Desert Storm
the War
2.
of the Axis or something like that. Axis of Evil War Part 1. I mean, then now we're at war officially.
Yeah.
Congress literally declared war against, gave the president authorization to use military force and declare war against Iran. Like. Oh my God, $180 billion to Ukraine so we can kill people. We're not at war. Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.